Alright, so today we're going to go over a tutorial for how to make an Edison bulb. This is what the final product looks like. So let's get started. So here's the startup file in Blender. We can start by pressing X to delete the startup file. I'm going to press 1 on the number pad and go to front view. Hold on, let me turn on my screen display here. Okay, so we're going to start by adding a sphere to make the original bulb. So I'm going to press Shift A, which is for adding a mesh, and I'm going to come over here and go to UV sphere. And we're going to increase the size and shape of this sphere. So let's press Tab to go into edit mode, A to deselect, Z to go into wireframe mode, and then I'm going to press 5 on the number pad to go to orthogonal view. And I'm zooming in on the scroll wheel a little bit, and let's use B for box select, and we're going to select all of these vertices, and then I'm going to zoom out on the scroll wheel, left click the blue arrow here, and just drag that down to get sort of the initial shape for the bulb. And then I'm going to leave those selected and press S and drag the mouse out a little bit to scale it, and then I'm going to click the blue and drag it down a little bit further. You can play around with the bulb shape depending on whatever effect you're looking for. I also want to add a little nipple at the bottom here. The actual bulbs have that, and it helps with the refraction or reflection of the light inside the bulb. So if we zoom in here, I'm going to hold Alt and then right click to select all the way around the edge, and I'm going to bring this up a little bit and then press S and scale it in, and then I'm going to hold Alt again and right click on this face and press S to scale that in. And so basically it's going to come sort of to a close here, and then I'm going to continue Alt and then right click, and then I'm going to scale this. This is going to be the nipple part on the bottom of the bulb here. I'm going to zoom in a little more, hold Shift while pressing the middle mouse button to pan, and then Alt, right click to select this face. I'm going to move it up a little bit and scale it in here like that. So that looks pretty good. We can adjust it in the final rendering if it doesn't quite look right, but in general it should give us a good sense of what the light bulb looks like. And the last step here, we can press Tab to go back into object mode, but then we're going to come over here and add an object modifier, solidify, and we're going to set the thickness to 0.05. That'll give the glass a little bit of thickness when we apply the materials. Okay, press A to deselect that. Now we're going to add a top connector part by pressing Shift A, and we're going to add a cylinder. We're going to move the cylinder up a little bit, scale it down just a little bit by pressing S, moving the mouse, and then left clicking. I'm left clicking on these arrows to get it into position. I'm going to press 7 on the number pad to see the top view. Top view looks good. It's centered around the bulb here. Now I'm going to press Tab to go into edit mode, and then A to deselect, and we're going to zoom in here and create a profile for this top connector piece. You can really play around with this however you like. I'm going to show you one thing that you could do. I'm going to press B for box select, select these top vertices here, and I press E to extrude and just press enter without moving the mouse, and this duplicates those vertices. And now I'm going to press S to scale them out, and scale them out a little bit just like this. And then I'm going to press E to extrude, move it up with the mouse, and then left click, and then I'm going to extrude without moving again, so press E to extrude and then enter to set the points, and then I'm going to scale those new points in to about the same diameter as the bottom part, and then click, and I'm going to press E to extrude, move it up a little bit, and then E to extrude again, move it up, and this time I'm going to have it profile in a little bit here. And then E to extrude again, left click, and then press S to scale it in, like that. E to extrude, this time we'll go straight up again, and then E again, S to scale it in, E to extrude, S to scale, and then we can just press E, make sort of a top piece here, E, enter, scale it down to sort of a last sort of wire coming out like that. And we'll zoom out a little more and drag this up so it just goes out of the shot. Okay, so now we've got our connector. If you press Z and tab, you can kind of get a sense for what that looks like. The shading on these is still flat shading. I'm going to right click on this to select the object and just change that to smooth. And some people like the sort of more polygon look of this. It's up to you if you want to change this shading to smooth or not. So now we've got the top connector set. What we're going to do now is add a metal rod that goes in the inside of the light bulb. And we're going to hit Shift A again to add a mesh. We're going to add another cylinder. Move it over here. And I'm going to press Tab to go into Edit mode, and then Z to go into Wireframe mode, or View. Let's start by pressing S to scale it to a little bit closer to the starting diameter, and then I'm going to move it up so that it starts around this area. Press A, and use box select again, select these bottom vertices, press E to extrude, and then enter, and then S to scale it so we can have a thinner rod coming out here. Left click to set it, and then E, we're going to extrude down to about the maximum diameter of the bulb, and then E to extrude, enter without moving to duplicate the vertices. S, we're going to scale it out a little bit, and then E to extrude, move down just a little bit, and enter. And then press A to deselect. Looks pretty good. A to select, and we'll just move it into position here for the bulb. And I'm actually feeling like the scale of the whole thing, this rod is a little bit too big. So I'm going to press S and just scale it down a little bit, and then I'll move it up and press A to deselect and B to box select just this bottom part here, and we'll drag it down. Okay, that looks a little better. Okay, now we're going to press Tab to go back to object mode, A to deselect. Anytime you're adding new objects, you want to make sure you're in object mode, not in edit mode. Now what we're going to do is create the filament that's going to go inside the bulb. So I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to add a new curve, and we're going to select circle. And so this is what this circle is what we've created. I'm going to press Tab to go into edit mode, and let's shrink this a little bit. Just going to fix the view a little bit here. So you can see that we have this circle, and it just has these 4 points around the outside, and I want to increase it to 12 points. So on the left here, I'm going to select subdivide, and then make sure that I can view this window here. If it was like that, I wouldn't be able to view it. And then change this to 2 cuts. So now we have 12 points around the outside. So it cut the 4 into 8, and then it cut it again cut every point into 3. So now you have 3 times as many points around the outside. What we're going to do now is I'm going to press 7 for a top view. Get it panned right. And I'm going to select every other vertex here by holding Shift and just right-clicking on them. And then I'm going to press 1 for front view again. And since these are still selected, I'm going to left-click on the blue arrow here and just drag those down. So this is going to give us a loop-like appearance. And then I want to scale it so that, oops, I'm going to do that. I'm going to press A to select all of them. Or I pressed A to deselect and then A again to select all. And now I'm going to press S, and I just want the diameter of this to be a little bit smaller. That's good. And then we want it to start around here inside the bulb. And I'm going to press A to deselect, B for box select. I'm going to choose the bottom vertices, left-click the blue arrow, and bring them down to about level with the biggest part of the diameter of the bulb. So this looks good, except these loops are going all over the place. We want them going a little bit more straight up and down. So this is where a little bit of tediousness comes in. We're going to press 7 to see the top view, and the reason why they're so loopy is because the lines, or the points that decide how the curve functions, are so long coming out of each point. So if we take a single point here, notice how this point is really far away from this point, which causes it to go through more of a curve. So we're going to systematically go through each of these 12 points, and I'm going to right click on it on the outside points and just drag them closer to the center point. So I'm going to start with the ones that are straight up and down. They're a little bit easier, so you can just use the arrows. So I'm just shortening these. Right clicking on the outside points, dragging these points closer to the center. It doesn't have to be perfectly consistent, but generally we want to move these outside points towards the center. If you have a better way to do this, I would love to know. I couldn't figure out in Blender any easier way or shortcut to work with all of these at once or anything like that. So please share those ideas in the comments if you know a better method. For these ones, I'm right-clicking on the outer points and then left-clicking inside this circle to grab the point and move it closer here. So left-click and then right-click and grab, or click and hold. Left-click, or sorry, right-click, left-click and grab. Okay, so that little bit of work. Now we're going to press 1 for side view, and you can see now that they're much more straight up and down, which looks much more realistic how the filament actually looks in the bulb. Alright, I'm going to press A to deselect and then A to select all, and we're just going to shift this filament over here inside the bulb. I want to increase the diameter just a little bit now that I've placed it inside the bulb. So I'm going to press S to scale and just scale the whole thing. We're just going to make it a little bit too tall. And now I'll put it in here for the final adjustment, and I'll press A to deselect and then B to box select the bottom vertices here, pull them up to about level with the bottom of the glass rod. I'm going to do the same thing, B for box select, select these top vertices and shift them down to close to the bottom section of this thicker diameter part of the glass rod. Alright, that looks okay. One last step is we want to add a little bit of thickness around this filament. So we're going to press Tab to go back into object mode, A to deselect, and I'm going to hit Shift A, and we're going to add another circle here. And this time we're going to press S to scale, and we're going to scale it to 0.01. So you press S for scale and just type in 0.01 and then enter. And so now we have this very tiny circle. We're going to go back to the filament here and click on this icon, and under Bevel Object we're going to choose Bézier's circle 0.001, which is that new tiny little circle that we created. And basically it uses this shape, and that's what it uses to create some thickness to our path. So we've chosen that. Now you can notice how this got a little bit thicker. And one last step is we now want to click on Object, go up here to Convert To. You can also hit Alt-C as a shortcut, and we want to choose Mesh from Curve. This converts the curve into a mesh. So we chose that. Now we can go to our circle and press X, delete it. It's no longer needed now that we've converted this the filament to a mesh. Okay, so our objects are finished being created, and now all we need to do is go through and set the materials for each of these objects. So we'll start with the filament, since that's what we have selected. And go up here, make sure that you first change your render to cycles render, and then we'll create a new material for this. And what we want to use is just the basic glass settings. And we're going to play around a little bit though with the volume. We're going to give it, set it to emission, and you can play around with colors. I'm just going to enter one that I ended up liking in the final render, kind of an orangey, and then we're going to set the strength to 1,000. Okay, and one thing that we can do as well, which will add to it looking a little more realistic in the final render, is we'll add another material that's just a regular diffuse material, and I'm going to zoom in here a little bit, and I'm going to press Tab to go into edit mode, and just press 1 to make sure that we're in front view, and I'm going to go to face select here, and then press B for box select, and just select the tips of the filament. And I'm actually not satisfied with that selection, so I'm going to try it again. There we go. So that's got a nice selection of these. I'm just going to press Assign here, and that's going to allow the tips to not glow in the same way as the rest of the filament, which is a more realistic outcome. So now I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom here. I'm going to press B for box select. Select these tips, and then with this material selected, which is just my diffuse white, I'm going to press Assign. Okay. Press A to deselect, Tab to go back into object mode. Zooming out. Now we're going to adjust the material for the top connector. This one you can do however you like. I'm just going to make it glossy, dark color and give it a roughness of 0.1. Hopefully that'll make it look a little more like metal and like a brushed metal sort of look. Now we're going to do the glass rod here. The glass rod and the bulb have the same material setting in general, so we're going to name it that so we can access it in our other when we're setting the bulb material. So we'll call it bulb material, and we're going to choose a mix shader, and we're going to mix transparent and glass, and we'll just leave the defaults for each of these. Okay. Now we're going to do the same thing with the bulb. If you click on this little icon here, you can see the ones you've already used. We'll choose bulb material, and that one is then set. And we're going to mess around with the nodes just a little bit because the reflection, there's a lot of noise that sometimes can be created with the bulb and the camera. So we're going to adjust that. So we'll click up here and choose compositing, and we've got our bulb selected, and although you can't see it very well here, the bulb is selected, and we're going to click on this little materials button to see the materials that are in play for the bulb from the node perspective, and we're going to add a few nodes. So I'm going to press Shift A to add a node, and the first node I'm going to add, go down to choose input, and we're going to choose light path, and we'll come up here and then left click, and we're going to add another node, go to color, mix, and then make sure you change this to add. And we're going to connect is camera ray to color 1, and is transmission ray to color 2, and we're going to connect the color output here to the faculty in the mix shader. So this tells the mix shader how to mix the transparent and the glass. You can see there. And we'll set the faculty here, sorry, the factor to 1. This should help with the noise, like the little specks of light when we do the final render. Okay, so that's done. We're going to go here and go back to default, and A to deselect. We probably don't need to view wireframe mode anymore, so we'll press Z to go back into solid mode. 1 for front view, and we're going to add a plane with a metal texture in the background just to give us a background. And you want to make sure that you go to user preferences and click on add-ons, and then it's just if you search planes here, make sure that this add-on is enabled. So import images as planes, make sure this checkbox is checked, and then save your user settings. And now that will allow you, when you press Shift A to add a mesh, you can come down and select images as planes. And I'm going to go to my textures and choose the texture that I want, and click import images as planes. And I've got this tiny little plane now. I'm going to rotate it. So I pressed R for rotate, and then X to restrict it to the X axis, and then I'm going to type in 90 degrees so that it comes up facing us. Press enter. I'm going to zoom out and then scale it, and then zoom and scale it some more. And I want this to be behind the light bulb. Press 1 for front view again. Let's get it a little bit more centered behind the bulb. Scale it down a little bit. Doesn't need to be quite that big. And the only thing we're going to do, if you come over here, make sure you're in the materials tab, we're going to set the surface to emission. We want it to create a little bit of light, but we're going to set it to 0.2 under the strength. So just a little bit of light, but not much. And we're also going to add a plane, another plane to create some light. We're going to hit Shift A, Mesh, Plane. We're going to move this plane over just the bottom left corner. You can put it wherever you want to create a certain effect. R for rotate, Y for y-axis, and we're going to choose 45 degrees. And then I'm going to scale it up a bit so you can see it's down here, shining up on it. I'll move it a little bit this way. You can do whatever you like. Maybe move it a little bit closer too. There we go. And then we're also going to take our lamp, which is trying to run away. And I'm going to press 7 for top view and move my lamp directly over the bulb. Go back to front view, lift it up a little bit, make sure it's out of the shot. And come over here, make sure you're in this tab, and then size, we're going to choose 3. Alright, now the last thing we got to do is set our camera. Press 0 for camera, and then move this over a little bit. I'm going to use the scroll wheel to increase the size of the viewfinder, and then I'm going to press N to open my settings and scroll down. Usually start here, scroll down, choose lock camera to view. This will move the camera as you move the viewfinder. So now I'm going to press N again to get rid of that. Now I'm going to zoom out a little bit, shift the view, pan a little bit more. I want to make sure we can see the nipple part on the bottom. Helps to add to the effect. That looks pretty good. We can do an initial render and see how it looks. So you click on this camera icon here, and then the most important thing in the rendering tab is your sampling. So under here where it says samples, if you render it at 10, it goes quite quickly, but the quality is worse. So let's start by rendering at 10 just to get a sense of how it looks at this point. So it looks pretty good. The glass looks pretty bad because the quality is so low. So you can come back and increase this. We'll just increase it to 100 here, but when you have it exactly as you want it, you should increase it high, maybe 1,000 or more, to really bring out the glass effects with the filament. So let's see. This gives you a sense of what it will look like when it processes the glass a little bit better. The goal is to get rid of the grainy looks and get more of the sort of light that's being reflected inside the bulb. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial of creating an Edison bulb. I'll see you next time.